Welcome to the Fanatics View Hockey Show. My name is James Lynch. So happy to have my next guest on here. He covers the Dallas Stars. He's a freelance writer and does a lot of really great work. Happy to get him on. I've been trying to get him on for the last little bit, and we finally made it happen here today. Travis Taylor joining me here on the program. Travis, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Good. How are you, James?
I'm doing awesome. And sorry, that's Travis Tyler. I think I said Taylor. Taylor's my boss, so that's maybe where I got that in mind. So yeah, Travis Tyler joining us here. Before we get into kind of the Dallas Stars, because I know obviously you do a great job covering all Dallas sports. For people who might not be familiar with your work, what do you, how tell us a little bit about the coverage you do just overall as a freelance writer.
Yeah, so I like you, I work with Taylor and do some of the stuff for Fanatics View throughout the DFW area. I've covered every Dallas team for one of the local papers for about a year and a half, and I write Dallas Stars stuff for Last Word on Hockey or Last Word on Sports, whichever website you get to their content through. And then that's the Dallas Star stuff, and then I do a bunch of other stuff in sports and all that. So yeah.
That's cool. How do you balance everything, like in terms of what you're going to cover? Is it just based off what, kind of what your week looks like, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's kind of based off of the week, kind of based off of what I have to do for everybody. It's just kind of what comes to everything else. It's just kind of like what comes to mind, or, if there's any big trending news or anything. Obviously, the Rantanen trade was a really big thing to get going on and kind of shove everything else off on the side, so to speak. But yeah.
We got anyone watching right now? If you have any questions, by all means, post them in the chat. I was curious, did everything kind of get put to the side with the Luka trade? I got to know that. With everything else, it's like, okay, I got to focus on this for a bit. Everything else has got to be on the back burner.
No, I don't do a lot of NBA stuff, so that wasn't like back when I was working for the paper. Yeah, it would have hit the back burner. But as a freelancer, I haven't really done much NBA stuff, so that was just kind of me reacting. I remember I was in my car and I got the alert on my phone from ESPN, and I was like, "Wait, did that say Luka?" Like, yeah. You gotta be kidding. Right?
I thought it was a troll account when I saw it. And I'm not even a big basketball fan, but obviously I know, Luka and what he means to the league and stuff. So that was a little bit nuts. So, you mentioned the Mikko trade. That was something we've talked about here at length here on the channel. What's sort of the temperature, I guess would be the best way to put it, going into the playoffs? Like, this to me looks like the year that Dallas could go and win it all. That's kind of the title of this video. Like, I think they've got a great shot. Other years they've had very good teams, but I think the one thing that Dallas hadn't done, and this is something I've kind of complained about with the team, is that they haven't really made that big trade. They've made, some moves at the trade deadline, but this is a big move. Do you get that sense this year that this could be the year to do it?
Yeah, I think this is the best team that they've had in a while. Obviously, making it to the Western Conference Finals 2 years in a row, is nothing to sneeze at, but I guess they, especially with offensively with their lineup, they've got a really deep team. We're not even talking about Tyler Seguin being healthy yet either. So you bring him in to that lineup, and you add Rantanen obviously with that big trade, which honestly is probably something I keep telling people, that's something that Jim Neal probably learned in Detroit, because that was what they would do with all those big teams when they were making their pushes for the playoffs and for the Stanley Cup. It's just, if the move's there, you go make it. And that was exactly what they had to do. I had absolutely no problem with what they had to give up there. Honestly, I thought they might have to give up more. And locking him in long-term is really good for them. Obviously Ottinger's starting to play like he does in the playoffs. And he's just, they have the goaltending, they have the offense. To me, it's just a question of, will they be healthy and will their defense hold up enough? Because there are some holes there, I would say. But overall, it's a really good team.
It's a well-balanced team, and this is something. Dallas was my pick last year to win the Cup. I know they kind of got out-muscled in that Oilers series a little bit. I don't know if that's something that will be different this time around, although the way the Oilers are playing right now, I don't even know if they'll get there. We'll see, but there's a lot of questions going on there. In terms of, the balance of this team, you mentioned sort of, obviously Mikko coming in and, adding sort of that extra punch for scoring. What would you say are some weaknesses? Because I don't really see a whole lot on the team right now. Even if you look on the back end and some of the injuries and stuff, they've been pretty, steady all year. Is there any weaknesses you can pinpoint?
If you ask Coach DeBoer, he'll probably point out stuff about like little details and everything, which is fair enough. There's times where like the defense will jump up in the offensive rush, where You like to see that sometimes, especially with guys like Harley and Bischel and those guys that have that offensive game. But then it'll leave opportunities open for the other teams to get down the ice and have odd man rushes and that kind of thing. And luckily, Ottinger's been saving them a little bit on those, and it hasn't been that many of them, I guess, but it has been a problem at times. I also think sometimes they play to their competition. Like they had a couple weeks ago, they had a 2-0 lead on Philly real quickly in the first period, and that game ended up going to overtime, tied at 2. So they couldn't quite put them away until overtime. So that's definitely concerning when you're playing against some of those better teams once the playoffs come along. And also lately, like you look at the Edmonton game, they've been taking some badly timed penalties. They were up 4-0 in that game. It ended up being a 4-3 game because Edmonton had the man advantage for pretty much the entire third period and was getting a lot of shots on Ottinger. And too many for him to say, like, you gave up 3 goals, but it was honestly one of his better performances this year. And even the guys were saying that after the game that they kind of let him down with that. So those are a couple things that when you're playing some of those tougher teams in the playoffs, like, they'll end up with Colorado likely in the first round unless they're able to jump Winnipeg here. They had that series with Vegas last year in the first round. That's a really tough opponent. I think that's something that kind of weighed them down a little bit because you're looking at they played Vegas, they played Colorado, and they played Edmonton. That's a tough 3 teams to go through on the way to try to win a Stanley Cup. So, those are some of the things that could be concerning when they get to the playoffs.
Well, I think, and it goes for the East too. I mean, you look at some of the potential matchups that could happen even in the first round. It's a little bit crazy. Are you in favor, like this is something I've asked pretty much all my guests. Are you in favor of the way they do the playoffs? I would prefer them going to it like a point thing where, you do have the best and the worst facing each other, because I think right now, nobody it's fun to see these matchups early on, but then also you get a really good team out of the way in the first round too. And it's like sometimes these teams, depending on what matchup you have, they almost have an easier path to the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I like the old way they used to do it. Honestly,
Same.
it's. I mean that's what I grew up on. That's more fun. I mean, yeah, I don't know how else to put it. There's, I think it was a better system before. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And it's too bad because I think on the recent GM innings, I don't even think there was a pushback on it to change it. But I know a lot of the fans and even the media wants to, go back to that different format. You mentioned Winnipeg. The way things are looking right now, I mean, Dallas could overtake them in the standings. Is that something you anticipate? I haven't really looked at the schedule, but, Winnipeg's been kind of, they've been okay, but they haven't really been blowing people out of the water either. Like I watched the Canucks game as a good example. Like Canucks, early on were looking good and, Winnipeg didn't end up taking it, but I don't think Winnipeg's been as dominant as maybe they have been earlier in the season. Do you think there's a possibility Dallas could overtake them?
Oh yeah, there's definitely a possibility. I mean, you look, it's a 4-point difference right now, I believe. Winnipeg comes here to Dallas next Thursday, I think it is. So, I don't know what Winnipeg's schedule looks like, but Dallas has a pretty manageable schedule otherwise. Like there's a couple tough teams in there, but they're also sitting outside of the playoffs right now, so they're not exactly playoff teams. And Winnipeg had that hot start, but they haven't exactly been the same since then. I mean, Hellebuck is probably still the best goalie in the NHL, but that everything else is pretty even when they face off against each other. So it'll be a really big one, next week. I mean, obviously Dallas has to take care of business against Nashville and Pittsburgh and those teams that are coming in here before that, and they have one. I think they play in Minnesota before that too, so that's not exactly easiest game. But
not smooth.
There's definitely a chance, and it's going to come down to the wire. And I don't think we thought we were going to be saying that the way Dallas started the season. Like obviously they had a few. You knew how skilled the roster was, right? But they had those injuries that they dealt with, and they kind of got off to a slow start and weren't as good as you thought they were going to be. And now, I mean, it's just like last year. They were on pretty much the same pace all year, and then they caught fire right after the trade deadline pretty much this year. I think the streak started a little earlier than the trade deadline, pretty much right when the calendar turned to 2025. And, they're streaking towards possibly stealing the Western Conference again, which is a little bit of a surprise at this point.
I got to say, though, selfishly as a Canadian, I kind of want Winnipeg and St. Louis to play each other just because we get a rematch of the Four Nations, right? Bennington against Hellebuck. And I think St. Louis is one of those teams, the way they're playing right now, they could upset Winnipeg. Like, I don't know how you feel about Winnipeg, but if you kind of look at the underlying stats, they are kind of playing a bit above their, what's the PDO? Like, they're kind of playing a little bit above what they should be. Plus, they got some injuries, which, by the way, thanks for reminding me about that, John B. in here, Velarde being out as well. So this kind of looks like, and we've seen this with other teams. They have a good regular season record. Look at the Bruins a couple of years ago against Florida. Like, you can see situations like that where teams kind of run out of steam. What's sort of your expectation? Again, I know we're focused on Dallas, but I'm sure you're keeping an eye on the other teams. Do you think Winnipeg could be one of those teams that could be an early exit?
I guess like roster wise, they have the weaknesses, but at the same time, they have like goaltender is going to take you far in the playoffs. Goaltenders are a big thing, especially you get to those overtime games, and you look at the Dallas Colorado series last year. Ottinger was the difference in that series. So as long as they have Hellebuck, they always have a chance of the series. But I do think, the way they've played recently and the way some of those injuries have come into effect, that it's a possibility somebody at least gives them a hard time. And we see it with one of those top teams every year. There's always there's pretty much always at least one top team that, won the division pretty handily, and then all of a sudden they get to the playoffs and it's completely different. So,
well, what do you think of this? Because I'm also of this theory as well, and curious to get your thoughts. So you mentioned Hellebuck, and I completely agree. He's the best goaltender in the league. I think they're overplaying him. And I think this happened last year, right? Where you go into the playoffs, Colorado, that series, like it didn't go their way because I think Hellebuck kind of ran out of steam. I don't know why they're not playing their backup. I think the backup position is something they haven't really addressed, like nothing against Eric Comrie, but you look at most of these top teams, they've got a pretty solid backup in there. Comrie's not terrible or anything, but I just think that like if they maybe would have addressed that, also addressed the second line center position, I'd feel a little bit better. But I think right now, like that is a concern of mine if I'm a Jets fan, just knowing that Hellebuck might run out of steam. And look, as someone who lives in Vancouver with the Canucks, this is why Demko's injured, because they overplayed him all these seasons, and this is the result of overplaying your goalie. Do you think that could be a factor going in here with Hellebuck?
Yeah, it's a factor with anybody. I feel like he's a little more prepared than some others.
Okay, that's fair,
to be able to handle that. But also, like we talk about the Winnipeg versus Dallas type of thing, that's where Dallas might have a little bit of an advantage. And I know some Stars fans might not like hearing that because Casey DeSmith gets a lot of flack around here, but
does he really? That's okay. Yeah. The reason I bring that up is because he was the Canucks backup last year. I liked him. He had a couple bad stretches throughout the year, but I actually wanted the Canucks to try and re-sign him, and I know ultimately he went with Dallas. But you remember in that Nashville series last year, he ended up winning us a couple games during the series because he was a starter in Pittsburgh. He's got that experience. Like he can be hot and cold, but I think he's a pretty solid backup up there. I think he's definitely an upgrade over Wedgwood from last year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. He's had a couple tough games this year, but he's been really good lately, especially. He's got, like I was saying, he's got better numbers than a lot of team starters. I know it's more limited sample size, but it's weird. Like you ask a lot of people around here, they'll be like, "We need Wedgwood back." Like that we would rather have Wedgwood over DeSmith, and I'm just like, I understand the loyalty and the allegiance. But at some point, stats got to count for something, and you gotta look at what they're doing. I'll admit I haven't looked at what Wedgwood's doing lately, but they've voiced their faith in DeSmith, and he's played pretty well lately. He's actually, like I said, limited stats, or limited sample size, but statistically, he has a better goals against average than Ottinger does this year, and obviously that's skewed a little bit, but.
Games played,
yeah. He's not playing nearly as badly as people think he is.
Let's get to a couple questions here, and then I want to ask you a few more things about the Stars. I'm predicting Dallas will pass my Jets, and then the Jets will lose to Colorado again. We'll see. I don't know. It seems like there's a general consensus, though. Like just talking to people, people in the media, people, fans, and all that. A lot of people feel like the Jets are kind of punching above their limit here, but we'll see. Because again, anything can happen in the playoffs, right? There could be injuries. There's all types of factors there, so we'll see. I'm kind of leaning your way, John, but We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Michael's also not a fan of the playoff format. Okay, we can all agree on that. We talked about the injuries. Even with the old playoff format, Leafs versus Bruins would have happened almost every year. I think that, I guess that's true. Yeah. But at the same time, it makes it kind of interesting. Yeah, exactly. I don't trust Hellebuck. Jets are on fraud watch. Okay, I'm not going that far as Jets are on fraud watch, but didn't address our biggest needed deadline. Well, I think part of this, and this is something I talked with Avery last week. We had Avery on who covers the Oilers. I don't know if a lot of players, like, as much as the Winnipeg's a great team and good organization, kind of what I'm hearing around the league, a lot of players don't want to play in Winnipeg, right? Like just because of the, the climate, the market, all that stuff. Like it's not, it's not like Florida, you know what I mean? Like no state tax, all that stuff, right? Like there's certainly destinations for players that are a little bit more appealing. I think that played a little bit into it. And I also think that, I don't know, I think Winnipeg could have been a bit more aggressive. I know they wanted Brock Nelson, Nelson ultimately going to Colorado, but I think that could be something that bites them in the butt because you look at these teams that made some big splash. Look at Florida. They get Brad Marchand. Like who wouldn't want to have him in the playoffs, And they're a rival of the Bruins, which is even more surprising, right? So
yeah, I was surprised that they ended up trading him into the division. I knew he was going to
for like next to nothing either. Like what was it? The second round pick, I think, for Marchand, right?
Something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was.
But it wasn't even. Yeah, so it was a little bit surprised. But I think part of that too is just. I don't know. Bruins I guess they're in a rebuild or whatever they're trying to do right now. So, Wedge went to our rivals. He's dead to most of us. Understandable. It's fair. Well, to be fair, he was with Nashville and then
what he was with Nashville was mostly when people were calling for him, or we were calling for the Stars to bring him back. I can see, obviously playing in Colorado, that's going to damage his reputation with a lot of Stars fans. But at the same time, I've talked to a lot of Stars fans just in everyday life. They're just like, I would rather have Wedgwood than DeSmith, which is interesting at least. But I can see why we think that way.
I grew up in Winnipeg. There's not a lot to love. Okay, I like this self-admitting stuff here. And after Nelson was gone, I was going to the Jets. I would go after Middlestat. They would have the assets to do it. I guess the only thing with Middlestat is, right, like, he's kind of hasn't really lived up to what people expected. It's actually interesting that trade last year because it was Middlestat for Byram. And now Byram, I know he stayed with Buffalo, but I don't know if there's a certainty of him staying there for the future. So, I'm not sure. I think Middlestat went to Boston, if I'm not mistaken. At the deadline. He went to someone. I can't remember. It was an Eastern team. I just can't remember off the top of my head. But anyways, you were not talking about that. Injuries. That was one thing I was going to ask you about the Stars. You would know better than anyone. Is there any sort of updates on some of the players that are on the shelf as far as like being ready for the playoffs? Are you hearing anything as far as the health of some of the players that have been sidelined?
I haven't heard. I mean, I haven't been to practice in a while since they've been out of town, so I haven't seen much. I know Sagan went with them on the road trip and was skating. They're practicing right now, so obviously I'm not at practice today. So
no worries. And you're doing this show, which I appreciate, by the way.
Yeah, I did see some rumor that he was practicing today. I don't know if that's true or not. So preface that. And previously Jim Nill has said that they might have to deal with that first round playoff series without Miro Heiskanen. So
okay, that was going to be the next question. John was asking that too. So because you get him back, man, that is a game changer. That's like getting a player at the trade deadline to a certain degree, So
a little bit, and the way Thomas Harley's played since he went out too has been tremendous. I mean that's two. I'm not going to go as far to say he's another Miro Heiskanen yet, but there's two very top of the line elite defensemen generally speaking, very young defensemen in that decor and on that first pair of the blue line.
Well, what does it say as well? You look at all these draft picks that have really panned out for Dallas. Like, I mean, I'd have to go look at the list. I know the Athletic usually release like a list, like the best teams that have prospects, but you look at how much homegrown talent that Dallas has had, and then you can trade a Logan Stankoven and it's not a big deal because you have such a good pipeline. I think one of the incredible things with Dallas that I think has been remarkable is that they've still been competitive, but they're still drafting well and inserting players, and they can move on from it. They can move on from like a Ryan Suter or these other players where they can insert the younger guys in there. Just how impressive has that been, just seeing that a lot of their you mentioned Harley, like they've got these guys for a while too, like even when your Benz and your Sagans move on, they have these other players ready to go. How impressive is that?
I mean that's it's very impressive. Obviously, I think that's obviously what you want your organization to be able to do, is just churn out all these players. hit on all these draft picks and just be competitive all the time. And that's why I think, obviously this is a big year for Dallas, but the window is not going to close if they don't win this year. It's probably, it's probably the best shot that they've had, but they definitely have talent still everywhere within the system. I mean, look at Maverick Bork hasn't hit his full potential yet. Stankhoven didn't really hit his full potential. I mean, he played well in the playoffs last year, but goal scoring wise, he wasn't putting up huge numbers this year. And on with that trade, you're trading for one of the best players in the league, and then you're adding you're with Stankhoven, you're basically hoping he could become one of what you already have in your top 6, even in the top 9, because you basically Dallas is one of those teams that basically has 3 top 6 lines probably, and then you got that 4th line that DeBoer keeps talking about is coming along and playing well. Sam Steele's been a good surprise for them since he signed from Minnesota, I believe it was, and Colin Blackwell's played pretty well, and they've Oscar Beck has been a very, very good defensive forward while his offensive game comes along. So they're developing those guys and putting them in. And I think another thing that helps is they mix the veterans in very well. Matt Duchene's been an unbelievable influence on these guys. I think he's just stepping right in to pretty much that Pavelski role that was left vacant. He's not playing very much, but I think Brendan Smith has helped a lot of the guys here too.
Well, one of the interesting things that I found out recently was, and you don't think of this too often when it comes to assembling a team. And by the way, I see we got more questions. We'll get to those in a sec. Is like locker room culture. I know that's something that Dallas has been very big on for the last number of years, getting people in the locker room that are, positive influences, whether it's leaders or anything like that. Because I don't know if you know this, Tom Ghilardi, it was years ago before he bought the Stars, he was trying to buy the Vancouver Canucks. He's from this area here, and he ended up getting outbid by Aquilini. And trust me, Canucks fans would have loved to have Ghilardi as the owner instead of Aquilini. That's a story for another day. But he does local radio here every now and then, just because there's ties to Vancouver. And yeah, he really emphasized the locker room thing and getting players not necessarily that are the most skilled, but getting players that are having positive influences. As someone who's like around the team, I know not like a ton, but you're in the locker room, you're talking to these guys. Who are some players do you think that have really, I don't know, even from a media perspective, that are like, good locker room guys? Is there anyone that stands out that maybe we wouldn't think of?
I don't know if there's anyone you wouldn't think of. It's just a good group to be around. Like they love hanging out with each other. At least it seems like. And they're the locker room, especially after a win, is a really fun place to be. And they're always joking around and just having a good time. And you don't see that on every team. They're celebrating. I remember after Harley scored those 2 goals against Philly a couple weeks ago, they do this thing where around here, I don't know if anybody else is familiar with it, but they take a cowboy hat that has a Stars logo and put it on like the player of the game and take pictures for the marketing department or whatever. And they had him go grab somebody, and he went and grabbed Ilya Lyubushkin, who was wearing a Thomas Harley t-shirt under all his equipment. So that's the kind of locker room you kind of have there. Obviously, I mentioned Duchene and Smith having the influence. I think Ottinger's become a pretty big leader for them. And they'll probably tell you as much. And then, Jason, some of the younger guys, just the more experience they get, the better leaders they've become. And like Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz. And so that's the way things have been. I mean, I haven't been around a lot of NHL locker rooms, obviously, but this is one that is generally enjoyable to be around and a good time.
Okay. Let's get to some more questions here. Dallas Star Diehard says, waiting for contact on Segi. Miro just started skating. Okay, so he's got the scoop, I guess, as far as what's going on. Harley's a feel-good story, really stepped up. Yep. And also Four Nations. Remember that whole thing with the, Theodore was out, and they brought him in to play defense and help out. I thought that was like a big thing as well. Segi is skating. Last step for him is skating with contact. Yes, I know what you meant.
Yeah.
Really impressed with Duchesne. Right up there with JT. Solid draft cost, still putting up numbers. Well, and this speaks to the locker room thing again. I think Duchesne coming back. I mean, remember the whole thing with him with Nashville and them like buying him out, and then it was I think some assumed that he would get another big contract somewhere else, but he opted to stay with Dallas and sort of these shorter contracts. I think part of that's got to do with the fact that it's a good situation for him, right?
Yeah. He's I think he enjoys it here, and he enjoys being around those guys, and enjoys the role that he has on the team. I mean, and he's shown that he obviously still has it. I mean, he's tied for the team lead in points right now. So he's not only been a good influence, he's help backing it up on the ice and still being a productive player.
Dutch has been an incredible ad. Okay. Who's Dutch, by the way? Who am I?
That's Duchesne.
Duchesne. Duchesne. Yeah. Sorry. I know. Yeah. I've never heard him called Dutch before. So
they call him Dutchy. Yeah.
I don't think Dallas wants Colorado or whatever they play to know when Miro will return. I guess that's true too. A little bit of strategy.
That's
in
fair
there
enough.
As well.
Yeah.
Well, let me throw this to you. Who would you want to play in the playoffs if you're the Stars? Like, is there like a matchup? Like, you would probably know better than me as far as who's they played throughout the season. Is there like a better matchup for them? Do you think? In the playoffs for the first round? Like, I wouldn't want to play Colorado.
I don't know. I wouldn't want to play. I don't want to play Colorado. But I don't know if there's necessarily like a team that you say you want to play. I mean, I guess winning.
I can give you one, and maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but I think Edmonton, like, there's some issues there, and they got the injuries, right? Like McDavid's not 100% since the Four Nations.
I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that's fair enough.
And, it would be a little revenge angle from last year. I don't know. There's a few
I was going to say winning the conference and then getting one of those wild card teams, because that's obviously an easier time than Colorado.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that would sort of be ideal. And then if you had to pick after that, I think those are some of the names.
Anybody but Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I said this on the show last week, and I want to get your take on this. Just looking at the Western Conference, to me, the three killers in that playoff format in the playoffs, to me, are Dallas, Colorado, and Vegas. Those are the three teams I think that if I had to put money and say one of these teams will make the final, I'm going with them. Again, Edmonton, my concerns are the injuries. The goaltending's always been an issue with them forever, like going back to Mike Smith before that as well. Like they could have had Kevin Lankinen. They could have signed him in the offseason, and the Canucks got obviously the benefit of that and how well he's playing. He could have been a great backup. And then, just when Draisaitl and McDavid aren't on, we've seen what the Oilers look like, and it's not pretty. So that's one I'm not worried about. We talked about Winnipeg. Minnesota's dealing with injuries. I know they're getting some guys back as well, but you got Gustafsson, who's been kind of hot and cold. So I just think, like, to me, those are the three sort of teams that I would be worried about playing. What do you think? Is there any teams that I'm maybe not giving enough credit to? St. Louis could be good too as well. But
St. Louis is on a roll. I think those are the three. I mean, I was looking at the forwards for all those teams and everything earlier, and those are the three in the Western Conference, at least, that have the deepest four-line lineup. They probably have the best goalies for the most part, other than we've talked about Hellebuck already. So I think those are the deepest teams, and that's what will give you trouble during the playoffs.
We'll play anyone, but we prefer to have Miro against the Avs. Avs game scares me with our current defense. I mean, you guys have good defense, but I mean, they have Taves and Makar, right? I mean, that's probably the best tandem in the league if I had to put my money in there. So
that's another loaded lineup that you have to face. So
Jeff says Blumel is
full strength.
Yeah, no, for sure. Blummel's a high-scoring forward who's in the AHL. Texas Stars ready to come up to the NHL. I haven't been paying attention to the AHL, but how are the Texas Stars playing quite well? I assume
they made the playoffs again this year, so that's about what I know about them. Blumel I think he made the team to start the season, or he's been up in the NHL a couple times this year. I don't recall exactly, but he's been right on the fringe, and they're just kind of waiting for him to break through, I think, or find a spot for him to enter the lineup where he's better than what they have at the NHL level.
And speaking of which, got to give a quick plug to the Vancouver Canucks farm team, the Abbotsford Canucks, 10 straight wins. They're the St. Louis Blues of the AHL right now. They got another win last night, so that's a team to keep an eye out if you're into any AHL hockey. It's about the only positive thing this year for the Canucks organization. Would the Stars offer sheet Nick Robertson this summer? Ooh, get the brothers reunited. I don't know. Is that something?
I haven't thought about that. I don't know. I wish I could give you a better answer, but I have
I would think they could probably
Absolutely no
just
idea.
trade for him, no? And unless, because the thing with an offer sheet is, don't you have to give up a lot of draft picks, right? Is mine? Because I was saying to the Canucks, why don't they go offer sheet Luke Hughes, like to make sure that Quinn's going to stay in Vancouver? Go offer sheet his brother to some ridiculous contract, and then Hughes, because that's the whole thing. He wants to play with his brothers. Well, pry one of the brothers over New Jersey, not that they need any more defense.
Yeah, but. I'm pretty sure you only have to give up the stuff, give it up if the offer's not matched. So
yeah,
well,
that's what I'm saying. So they could sign him. And listen, it's worked out for look at St. Louis with Dylan Holloway and Broberg, right? Like they've been key pieces to that team this year. So I know the Leafs.
I guess my point is there's no harm in signing a guy to offer sheet. It's the consequence comes when it's either not matched and you've overpaid or something like that.
Yeah. That too, but I don't know if you've seen the RFA class. It's way stronger than the UFA class. So
I haven't jumped into much free agency yet. So
we talked about it last week on the show. Like there's, if you look, the free agent market isn't that good outside of like, obviously your Mitch Marner and Brock Besser, and there's a few other names out there that could be intriguing. But the RFA class, you got some really interesting ones like Josh Norris. Like he's got some injury history, but he could be a potential big ad for a team. Luke Hughes, like there's a lot of, I guess Nick Robertson's on there too. So I think we're going to see, especially with the cap and not a ton of, I know the cap's going up. I could see teams overpaying for RFAs and really causing some chaos. And I think there are teams that probably looked at what St. Louis did this last year and being like, okay, I guess it's on, like let's go for it. Right. So there's that. I highly doubt it. Too blessed with many forwards. Yeah, I would agree with that too. Segi's been skating for several weeks. We'll introduce contact.
I knew that. Yeah.
How much of a factor is the state? You guys don't have state tax in Dallas, right? If I'm not mistaken.
I believe that's what it is.
I know there's only a few markets. There's like the Floridas, obviously, and then I believe Dallas is the other one.
Yeah, so, I think that was huge in getting Rantanen because he's getting the contract. But it's a similar deal to what he had before, or what he had on the table from other teams. It's just like he's going to keep more of that money. So I think that's an easier way to get these guys in there and to make these big moves, and it definitely helps salary cap wise, obviously.
Can we also just talk about the fact that Mikko never wanted to go to Carolina? Like, how much of a blunder is that on Carolina? Like, all I ever hear in the media is how great of a franchise Carolina is, the model franchise. And this is 2 years in a row now they've messed up with trades. They got Getzel last year. He ended up walking, and they essentially got. And listen, I like Stan Coven. He's actually from here in Vancouver. Very, very, promising prospect. But like, come on, man, you didn't do your due diligence that the guy you made this huge trade for doesn't even want to play for you. Like that to me is a huge blunder. And I know you can't, there's tampering and all that stuff you got to worry about, but like, how do you not do your homework on that? That seems crazy to me. So just saying.
Yeah, there's, they're still in the position they're in with. True.
Until they win a cup, I will not give them their due like a lot of people are. I'm just saying, and maybe I'm a little bit of a hater. Travis, this was awesome. I really appreciate the time. Just let our audience know anything you got coming up down the pipeline, whether it's hockey or any other sports, and where they can get a hold of you on social media.
Yeah, I'll probably have some stuff on the Fanatics Views channels with some videos and some interviews. You can follow my Twitter is @TTyler_sports. Also have some last word on sports stuff coming up probably, and then some NFL, college football, college basketball stuff on fansided.com. And what else we got? Probably have some stuff on Instagram and TikTok eventually. Just Travis Tyler Sports, all no spaces, no punctuation, nothing on those. So go ahead and follow, and anything I forgot to mention, you can find on my website, social media, travistyler.info. Has all the links to everything that I've been a part of. So yeah.
Perfect. Travis, appreciate this, man. We'll definitely get you back on for the playoffs. I know the Stars are going to be in the hunt for sure, kind of like we talked about at the top of the show here today. So thanks for joining us here on the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Appreciate it.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it.
Yeah, there you go. That is Travis Tyler covering the Dallas Stars and all types of Dallas related sports, but he does work for us here on Fanatics. We're happy to get him on here. He's been, doing some great work on the channel, and wanted to get him on, and we'll definitely get him back. I always like getting, different media members from different teams. So we had Avery last week. By the way, Troy Nowak going to come back next week. I think we'll talk a little bit more about the Columbus Blue Jackets, looking like they're not going to make the playoffs. A lot of stuff has changed over the last little bit in terms of the standings and everything else, which is kind of where I'm going to go right now. Let's go have a quick look at the standings right now. Keep the questions coming, everyone. Dallas Stars related or not, doesn't matter to me. We can talk about whatever you guys want, but let's have a quick look at the playoff picture. We do this every week and just see where the teams are standing right now. So there's been a bit of movement here. So if you look on the Eastern Conference right now, Washington's still at the top of the division, 105 as far as the points go. Incredible. Spencer Carver is going to win Coach of the Year. I don't think there's a question about that. Really impressive to see that. And Ovi, what are we down to now? 5 goals left. I think he's going to do it. So we'll see. Really good feel-good story there for the Washington Capitals. Despite all my slander about the Carolina Hurricanes, they still are in second place. But here's my thing, though. Hear me out here, people. Until they get to and I know they've won cups in the past. Okay, I'll give them their credit for that. But this is a team that has not progressed forward the last couple of years. And I feel like had some of those moves. Well, they had Getzel for the playoffs last year. I'll give them that. But I think they're to some degree a worse team now with Stankoven compared to Natchez. So we'll see if they're able to do anything here. I still got some questions about the goaltending, but we'll see how Carolina does in the playoffs. The Leafs, I think, will be better in the playoffs this year. They got the goaltending figured out by the looks of it. Austin Matthews, though, still not 100%, I don't think. So I don't know how much that's going to affect them in the playoffs. You got Tampa Bay, who, again, won, I think it was yesterday, got another really good victory there. They're looking pretty scary. You can never count out Tampa Bay. You got Florida, obviously, doing their thing. New Jersey, Ottawa, comfortably in 7th right now. And then the Canadians are in a playoff spot, just 2 points ahead of the Columbus Blue Jackets. But you look at the points here. The Jackets have games in hand here. So they got to win their next game here if they want to tie Montreal. I think with the points percentage and all that, I don't know how that works as far as who would get in if they end up tying. And the Rangers, we'll see. They're still technically in it. Detroit losing last night. Detroit was they were close to winning that game, and then St. Louis ended up getting it done. So they're a bit too back, and same with the Islanders. So yeah, right now it's getting very interesting in the East here, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see who ends up getting in, but it's going to be a very tight race there. Western Conference, same thing. Pretty much the same as last week, Winnipeg. But you look at Dallas, very close behind here. They've got a game in hand on Winnipeg, so they could sneak in just 2 points behind Winnipeg. You got the Knights as well, not that far behind Colorado. LA's moved up a bit. Edmonton's slipping a bit. They're now in 6th. And you got the Blues ahead of the Wild. Granted, they have a game. The Wild have a game in hand here, so we'll see if they are able to do anything there. And you still technically got Calgary and Vancouver. I mean, they're mathematically in, but I have a hard time seeing Calgary or Vancouver getting in at this point. Same thing goes with Utah. But yeah, I think for those teams, it's more about getting the draft picks. So that's what we're looking at for the NHL standings. We'll get to the games in a second. I know you guys got some questions. No state tax in Texas. Offer Nick Robertson $4 million a season, but I don't think they need to. I think the idea is cool, right? Like getting the brothers reunited, but I don't think it's something like Dallas needs unless they have some sort of meltdown in the playoffs, but I don't see that happening as well. Tennessee doesn't have state tax. Well, who wants to play in Nashville right now? That's a complete dumpster fire as far as what they did this season. Jim gave up 3 first rounds, a second, 2/3, which is completely unlike him. But this is what I'm saying, though. That's the one big criticism of the Dallas Stars the last couple of years. They've been making trades. They haven't been taking big swings. Look at the teams that make big swings over the last couple of years. Florida, right? To get Matthew Tkachuk, they end up winning a cup. Vegas, trading for Jack Eichel. They make a big swing. They end up winning a cup. You look at these teams that are taking these big swings. That's and sometimes it can backfire, right? Like we've seen this as well. But I admire teams that are willing to take those big risks, and I think this was a very calculated, good risk by Jim Nill to get them Mikko Rantanen, and I think it will pay dividends in the playoffs. But we'll see. I'll just tell you guys right now. I think Dallas. I think they will win the cup this year. I think they got it. I begged. Well, I shouldn't say I beg. I find me a team that's more balanced than they are. I mean, maybe if you look at the East, you got Florida, Tampa Bay, maybe, around there, they're pretty, but you look at these teams that have like every area covered. I mean, I was just talking with Travis here about the weaknesses of the Stars. There really isn't much there. Great for Duchesne. I agree. Who would you say was the biggest number one first overall bust, Yakupov or Dag? It's got to be Yakupov, because Dag, at least, I think he made like a comeback later on and at least was like in the league. Yakupov, he had a couple of years for the Oilers, went to St. Louis, and then he just vanished. So to me, it's got to be Yakupov. Montgomery being the convo for Jack Adams. Who would you give the GM of the Year award to? GM of the Year. Trying to think like a really good trade that's benefited a team this year. I mean, you could make an argument for Washington as well with the fact that they got who is it? Well, they got Chikrin, and then they got was it well, Pierre-Luc Dubois hasn't exactly been like lighting it on fire. Like it'll be one of the top teams for sure. I think Dallas definitely could have a case too. I think Jim Nill should be in that conversation for the fact that he was able to get Mikko Rantanen. I mean, granted, that was somewhat circumstantial in the sense of that Mikko only had a certain amount of teams that he wanted to go to, but still, that's that's got to be in that conversation. That was a crazy comeback last night, huge for sure. Jim Nill 3-peat. I'm willing to accept Calgary is done now. Good season, except now they'll be picking 15th overall. Yeah. Right there with the Canucks. If they win the cup, I didn't get one team correct in the Frozen Four. So many upsets. Who did you have? Who did you have winning? I don't even remember. Dallas going to underperform like last season. I don't know. I mean, again, the Oilers, I don't know what happened in that series last year. They just got like out muscled. Like if you compare the Vancouver Oilers series last year to Dallas and Oilers, Dallas, like they barely hit or anything. And they had guys like Tanev that could do that. So that's something they're going to have to address this year if they want to do well. But Billy, I'll tell you, man, I think St. Louis, they're definitely going to be that dark horse because they've got, guys that have won the cup. They've got that veteran experience. And then they've got players that have certainly stepped up and played very well. Like Robert Thomas, man, have you been seeing his numbers? He's been playing great. So, yeah, St. Louis is going to be a surprise team, but I'm with you guys in the chat. Like Winnipeg is not a team I feel super confident about. And, granted, going into the season, I think I had them slipping a lot. They ended up being one of the best teams in the league. They are actually atop the league right now, although they have one more game played than Washington. So Washington could still finish with the President's Trophy, but either way, I don't know. I think there's some criticisms of Winnipeg for sure. I would say that. Let's have a quick look at some of the games that took place last night, and then we will look ahead to the games tonight. There's a few games on the docket here, but a lot of action there. John mentioned it there, the Montreal Canadiens coming back and defeating the Florida Panthers. So that's a big win for them. Their playoff lives continue to stay alive. You got the Sabres beating the Senators. What's going on in Ottawa? I mean, they're going to make it, but they haven't been playing great. Let's look at their record the last little bit here. I feel like they've lost like a couple key games here. Yeah, you're losing to the Penguins and the Sabres and barely getting by Columbus. They did beat the Wings and then they lose to the Sabres before. Like, come on, Ottawa, you got to get it. Like, I'm kind of rooting for Ottawa here. Like this is a team that has not been in the playoffs for a while. They got a young team. They're a team that's been going through a rebuild for a while, and it hasn't really worked out. And I feel like this is the year, with some of the acquisitions they've made where it's like, okay, are they going to take a step forward? They finally get the goaltending solved. So I'm hoping they'll do a little bit better. The Jackets getting a much needed win against the Predators, 8 goals there. I mean, remember that game last Friday with them in Vancouver? It was like a total shootout. It was like 80s hockey. Capitals beating the Bruins, no surprise there. The Lightning beating the Islanders, so the Islanders are the tough loss there. The Blues beating the Red Wings in overtime. Again, I mentioned it there. St. Louis, I think they're 10 straight. Utah with a key win over Calgary. I think that really put the dagger in Calgary's hopes yesterday. You got the Ducks and Sharks, who cares? The Oilers beating the Golden Knights. I was kind of ragging on the Oilers, but they did get a big win yesterday on the road against the Golden Knights. We'll see where they end up in the standings. And the Kings beating the Jets at home 4-1. Actually didn't see that game last night. So how did that play out? Yeah, the Kings getting 2 early goals and then ends up finishing it off in the third period with 3 there. And this goal scorers there for the Kings, Adrian Kempe and Kopitar. Also, Andrei Kuzmenko, who I'll be honest, I'm rooting for a little bit. Former Canuck, very exciting player to watch. Just doesn't play a lot of defense, and that's why he's fallen out of Calgary, Vancouver, and Philly. Had a cup of coffee there. Who thought that wasn't going to pan out there? So as far as tonight goes, let's have a look at the odds, courtesy of our friends over at Bodog. Actually, before we do that, any other questions here? Power play failed Dallas last year against the Oil. That's true. Thomas is the man. What's up? St. Louis winning 10 games in a row. How much longer can they go? I mean, you never know. Okay, you guys tell me this. Billy, you're in the chat. This reminds me a bit of the 2019 team, the team that went on to win the cup. Like, it's just got a bit of everything. There's no real superstar standouts or anything, but they're playing solid, and it's really worked out well for them. So I honestly, I'm not underestimating St. Louis anymore. So impressed with Holloway and Broberg. Doug Armstrong should get a consideration for GM of the year for fleecing the Oilers. I agree. The Jets are extremely structured. They are a tough out. I agree. I just think, again, you overplaying Hellebuck. Some worries about the second line center. We'll see. Not sure for how long. Just hope they have the Avs next week. Don't know what that means, but we'll look at it there. Okay, let's have a look here quickly at the odds for some of the games here tonight. anything I might take a look at here from a betting perspective. So you got the Wild as underdogs against the Rangers on the road. That catches my eye right away. The Rangers, yes, they're fighting for their playoff lives, but I'm telling you, man, I watched that game a couple weeks ago. Rangers still look like a disjointed team. They will be at home. That's allowed building at MSG, but I will lay a little bit, I think, on the Wild at plus money. You got the Washington Capitals playing the Hurricanes. Capitals might be worth a spot there, plus 180. They did play, Washington played last night, if I'm not mistaken, right? So they will be a little bit tired after playing the Bruins, but again, we're talking about one of the best teams in the league. You're getting the Capitals at plus money. That might be worth a stab too. Got the Panthers as favorites against the Maple Leafs. Don't disagree with that. The Avalanche minus 410 against the Blackhawks, the lowly Blackhawks. And you got the Kraken at plus money. You know what? Canucks are done. Like they're just, it's over. They've been getting some offense from, unlikely heroes, Pius Suter being one of them. You got Kiefer Sherwood, Garland, these guys stepping up and playing well. But the Kraken have played the Canucks quite well this year. Seattle's a 3-hour drive from Vancouver. It's not going to be that long. I might look at the Kraken at plus money as well, too. So a couple underdogs maybe to keep in mind for tonight's game if you guys are looking to bet. Those are some ones that I'll be keeping an eye on. But yeah, I just think like at this point, like Canucks have got to know. I know, the narrative out there is that, obviously, they're not mathematically eliminated, but they're done. I mean, there's no question about it. St. Louis is going to cool off. Minnesota isn't going to cool off, I don't think. You're going to get some interesting things. And then, something that should be worth mentioning that I think is another distraction in a very distraction-filled season is this Rick Tocchet stuff. So the rumblings that came out yesterday in the media was that Rick Tocchet, apparently the Canucks made an offer. Rick Tocchet, I guess, was not interested in that offer. And now the team has basically come out and said they will use their option on Tocchet to basically make him a lame duck coach. And then they might just have him it sounds like Tocchet's staying no matter what, because the team has the option. I believe Tocchet can't just leave and go coach in Philly, because the big rumor is Philly fired John Tortorella last week. Rick Tocchet's beloved in Philly, played for the team, right? Everyone loves him there. He'd probably get a say in management. I mean, he'd get a lot of responsibility if he was in Philly. It's a very intriguing job from that perspective. So there's some talk that he may leave to go to Philly because this whole year has been a disaster. So the reason I bring this up is because, again, it's another distraction here for the Canucks, right? Like, it just that's been the theme of all season. If it wasn't JT Miller, it was the play of Elias Pettersson. If it wasn't the play of Elias Pettersson, it was, Thatcher Demko's injury. Like, there's just so many things that are distracting. So this is what I mean. Like, anytime the Canucks play, they're not even talking about the game itself. They're talking about other things like Tocchet and his contract extension. So I think these things all do seep into the team. And then there's also this controversy last week, just so you guys are aware, that they didn't pull the goalie in the Winnipeg game, and they should have. Right? Like, you're down by, I think they were down by 2 at that point, but your season's on the line here. Why do you not pull the goalie? So for those who didn't see the game, Thatcher Demko signals to the bench like, hey, am I coming off? And Tocchet ignores him, basically. There's something going on there. So yeah, again, the Canucks are a mess. I think it's worth it. I say this as someone who lives in Vancouver and supports the Canucks. It might be worth betting against them the rest of the season. You're getting the Kraken at plus money. So that's why I bring all that up. Okay. What do we got as far as some other questions? The Jets. Okay. Go Habs, go. Yeah, I mean, they're hanging around, and credit to the Habs. I mean, this is a team that has been rebuilding, and they have shown up and are now in playoff contention, and it's looking good. Will Elias Pettersson be traded in the summer if any team wants his contract? So this is a big debate right now going on in the market. I was listening to some stuff on the radio this morning. I don't see how you can trade him, because here's the issue. Canucks have a big hole at 2C. I think they hope Philip Cheetle will be that. We know what's going on with Philip Cheetle. He's injured right now. Like, it's... I think Cheetle's a big wild card. I don't think you can expect Philip Cheetle to... You can't rely on him, basically. He's already injured. They just traded for him. He's injured now. And the Canucks knew that when they traded for him, but, they had to get rid of Miller. They had to get something for him. Rangers willing to give up Cheetle. I mean, you got to remember, they basically flipped Miller for Cheetle. Mancini is a good defensive prospect, and basically Marcus Pettersson, because they used the first round pick that they got from the Rangers to get Marcus Pettersson. So that's essentially what they got in the trade. So, if Cheetle doesn't live up to what he lives up to, it's not the end of the world. But here's the thing. If you trade Pettersson, you're not going to get a top center in return for him. There's no way anyone's going to take that risk with that contract. I think they're going to end up keeping him, because I think the risk is worth it to see if he can get back to form. Then the risk is worse than trading him and him going to light it up with someone else. I think that's too much of a risk. So if I'm a betting man right now, because everyone in the league knows now, like, it was one thing earlier in the year when he was struggling in Vancouver, and only the Vancouver market was watching him on a regular basis going, is he ever going to get back to form? But guess what happened? He goes to the Four Nations. He plays the exact same way. It was not a factor, not an impact. Now, He was playing better when he came back from the Four Nations. There was some promise there. Still I don't think looked like the old Elias Pettersson, but looked at least serviceable, at least someone that's better than like a third line center, which is what he's basically looked like all season. So, there is some promise there. I'd say if he continued to play poorly, then maybe you are having that conversation of trying to get rid of him. But I don't know. I think it's in the Canucks' best interest to keep him because I think the upside of him getting back to form is better than the upside of trading him and he goes on and plays amazing for another team and you got nothing in return for it. Because here's the thing, who's going to play center? They don't have a first line center if you trade Pettersson. Pia Suter, who I love and I think they should bring back, is not a first or second line center in my opinion. He can play second C. I think in an injury situation like right now with Philip Cheadle, he's certainly playing that way, but I don't think that's sustainable. So you have to make a big decision on Pettersson. And to me, that decision is you keep him, you hope for the best. And if it doesn't pan out, then it doesn't matter. Hughes is leaving anyways. You might as well do a rebuild at that point. I think that's because here's the thing. There's a lot of Canucks fans that want to do a rebuild right now. I don't think Quinn Hughes is going to be into that. I think everything kind of rides on what Hughes wants to do with the Canucks. I think, and of course there's a possibility of Hughes sticking around and you're not sticking around anyways, even if you do keep all these good players. But the Canucks have a major issue with centers. And I think that trading, and I get it. I get the perspective of trying to trade Pettersson because obviously he didn't play well this year. But I think that risk is too high for the lack of center depth that they have already. That's my thoughts on Pettersson. Manifesting that cup win. I wasn't in St. Louis when they won in 2019. Well, good luck. Again, I think what St. Louis is doing is awesome. Good for them. I know they have great fans and, they got some fun players to watch. And I think it would be cool to see them go on any type of run here. Who's going to get the last question, guys? We're going to end this here shortly. Again, want to thank my guest here, Travis Tyler, for coming on and giving us some good insight on the Dallas Stars. Who's going to get one more here? And again, if I missed your question or you guys are watching the replay of this, you can always post questions in the chat. We're getting one more here today. If we don't, it's not a big deal. Well, we do the show every week. This is just a weekly show. So, all right, guys, probably a good time to end the show here. Really appreciate it. I'll be back next week. Who knows how things are going to look playoff-wise. Looks like Troy Nowak will be joining us next week, so we'll talk a bit about the Blue Jackets and obviously everything going on around the league. Again, want to give a big shout-out to our guest, Travis Tyler. You can follow him on Twitter at @TTyler. So that's TT Weiler _sports. So go check out his work, doing some great stuff here on Fanatics View and everywhere else. Hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good one, and thanks so much for watching.